Good evening. Welcome to the Learning and Teaching Committee meeting on March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. I'm calling the meeting to order at 5:30 and we have two citizens' comments. Mr. Kusher, would you read the?
Sure thing. Okay. During the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. Once the speaker has reached the 3-minute time limit, a timer will sound, and the speaker will be asked to finish their comment. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility towards others. Please note that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district and on behalf of our students, staff, families, and community members. Thank you.
Jennifer Stoner.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Stoner. I reside in St. Charles. I am a retired teacher, a parent, and a grandparent, and I want to speak to the core value of belonging and how it translates into the classroom. I know recently you probably have seen the article about Sarah Adam. Let me get her name right. Sarah. Imanamo, I believe is her name. She's a 6th grade teacher in Iowa, and she's had a poster up in her classroom for several months. The poster, if you've not seen it, it has several hands on the poster of different colors. In the middle of each hand is a red heart, and at the top of the poster it says, "Everyone is welcome here." The West Ada, Iowa School District has instructed her to take the poster down and has said, quote, that it encourages inadvertently division and controversy, and that it is against the law. So she has refused to do that. And so my question to you, related to the core value of belonging, if teachers in our school district post such posters or have such materials, will you be instructing them to take them down?
Right. As it was stated, we don't respond at this point in time, but someone will respond later. Thank you. Alice Fromling.
Hi, I'm Alice Fremling, and I live in South Elgin. When I taught English, one skill my sophomores worked on was analyzing the connotations of their word choice. Connotations are the suggestions implied by a specific word. At last Monday's meeting, 2 board members used the word burden to describe having both MLL and access programs at Anderson, and I wanted to speak about the connotations of that choice. A burden implies extra unnecessary weight, something unwanted that makes your life harder or more unpleasant. It suggests a power dynamic in which the carrier of the burden is primary and the burden itself is secondary. Maybe the question regarding Anderson is about space or FTEs, but the question is not, will these programs be a burden on the school? I have a son who's autistic. I grew up with a brother who is autistic. And I'll tell you, the last thing these families need from you is to create yet another space in this world where they feel like a burden, like unnecessary weight that brings down the core programs of the school. On the contrary, autism is a gift, and a program like Access makes a school even stronger. I'm sure your intent was not to marginalize, but the fact that the word burden was how you chose to phrase that question about resources is telling and concerning. Educators do not see their students as burdens. Your top priority right now needs to be making sure those families at Anderson are not moved again, some for the 4th time in 4 years. To move them again would be a disservice at best, and at worst, a continued discriminatory destruction of their entire elementary education. Something tells me that if our top achieving students in this district were being moved between schools for all their AP classes, or if AP Euro suddenly had a cap on the number of students it could accept, this board would remedy that right away. Public education is not a capitalistic business venture. One group of students should not get more access to top-notch services than another group because they'll be a better investment on test scores. Every single student in this district deserves access to the level of education that people are constantly moving here for because we're so exceptional and so great. I know you might have to spend some money to make this work, but you should know that the connotation of moving those students again would be that you do not value them, that you don't care about their education, that you truly do see them as extra unnecessary weight that can get shoved wherever it's easiest to fit them. I know what it's like to be collateral damage from a lack of district foresight, and it kind of sickens me that these families have been paying this price over and over and over again. I don't care if keeping them at Anderson doesn't yield the highest ROI or whatever. The district was responsible for putting those kids in this situation, and the district is responsible for getting them out. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you. All right, we will move on now to the learning and teaching update.
Mrs. McCabe, thank you so much. Board members, tonight Dr. Christensen will walk you through the progress we're making on our high school experience, the work behind that. But the intent of this really is to make sure that we're hitting the right spots for the board as we bring this forward on April 21st. So this is not intended to be an in-depth conversation on the high school experience itself. That will occur at the next L&T meeting. Dr. Christensen, do you want to walk us through this brief presentation?
Absolutely. Our outcomes for this brief presentation is for me to share the focal points for the high school experience presentation on the 21st as an update, and then also to collect from you any additional updates that you would like to be included that maybe were missed in what I share. All of the work that's been going on since July of this year has been rooted in each of the OKRs, or objective and key results, related to the high school experience goal for the school district. And so really sitting in a place of looking at this, not just as high school, but also EC through 12 plus, knowing that that culminates in high school, and that is really where, where we're focusing and why we're calling it a high school experience. The focal points for our presentation will include updates regarding the redesign and structure for the high school course offering book. This is really related to OKRs 1 and 2 as it relates to the high school experience, leaning into the inclusion of pathways and a stronger communication foundation for parents, families, and students, as well as for staff, as it relates to aligning coursework with post-secondary endeavors. We're leaning into New Trier and Stevenson and District 214 as models as we create our own product. We'll have an option, or some of the pieces, some of the artwork for the meeting on the 21st. Second is the College and Career Planning Committee work. This work, again, has been going on throughout the year, has about 20 members from middle and high school staff, really focusing in on the implementation of the PACE framework. So at the presentation on the 21st, we'll go into more depth about the PACE framework, which is in its third iteration and has implementation on July 1st, 2025, from direction from ISB. One of the things that will be brought on the 21st will be a recommendation for action, perhaps by the board at the next meeting, really focused on a college and career platform that will serve as a tool for families and students as well as educators in aligning our work with the PACE framework, and again, really creating a great communication tool, an exploration tool for our families and for our students. That does align with OKRs 1 and 2 also. The Time Usage Committee, the Secondary Time Usage Committee, has been working throughout the school year and has established their vision statement, including belief statements, vision, and guiding principles, and they'll be bringing that to share with you. And using that, which was supported by feedback from greater than 30% of our secondary educators, high favorability ratings, foreshadowing over 92% for each component or each statement within. Using that to conduct a gap analysis. They'll also be bringing with them the gap analysis work that they completed, based again on that staff involvement. And then June 16th, is the L&T meeting, they'll be where they will be bringing forth recommendations for time usage with our students for the 26-27 school year.
Audra, for the time usage, is that talking scheduling now?
It's talking about how we're using the time that we have from bell to bell, from beginning bell at 7:15 at the high school until 2:15. What does that structure look like? What is that time used for? So scheduling can be a component of it, but also would be supports that, students access, again, with college and career readiness, as well as academics.
Got it, because one of the things that we've heard a lot from the community, right, is start times and times, all that other stuff. And one of the things that we talked about previously was block scheduling versus, our schedule today. What are some of the benefits or other things? So is that
Correct. We'll jump into that, and then
Right.
we'll also talk, long-term getting into next year as we bring in more community conversation into it, that broader start and end time.
Got it.
Yep.
Yeah, because, perfect, because there's in my head, it's more of an evolution to that than a thing, so, thank you.
Perfect.
Absolutely. We're in the research stages right now, but they'll bring updates to you on the 21st of April.
But just can I further clarify though, so block scheduling is being discussed and reviewed?
In that group, yes.
In that group,
Yeah.
okay.
Being researched.
Part of that, the secondary time usage committee.
Yep.
Yes.
And then that really focuses in on OKR number 3. And then our last update that would be included is core curriculum work updates. So each of the 4 core curricular areas at the high school have been undergoing some form of CAI over the course of this year at different implementation stages, but really with the focus on having a guaranteed and viable curriculum with high rigor that does align with the pathways and ensuring that all options or opportunities are available to graduates at the conclusion of their time here in our school district. And that really does connect directly with OKRs 2 and 3. So with those being the focal points for the update, I'm curious if there are additional focal points or additional updates that you'd like to also be included so that we can meet definitely the needs.
Any comments or?
Heidi had her mic on first. You had your mic on
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry.
All right. Then I guess I'll go. So I'm very interested in the scheduling, obviously. The platform, I know that's been a continuous ask. That's something that I'd love to hear more about it and when we would be introducing it into the community. Is it middle schoolers start to get that from a scheduling perspective? Where does that fit?
We have that part of the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely, we do.
Those are the 2 big things. I guess I had 3. The last one is the post-secondary options. As we're talking about what does it look like after D303, right? There's a lot of well-paying trade jobs or other things that are available. Like, how will we facilitate opening that up?
Right.
And then, yeah.
We feel like we have that one covered too.
Yeah, I do.
love it.
So that is included in that
It-
second item as well? It's not just about a platform?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see that, especially with the tool. For those who have or had high school students, you'll remember Naviance. So you'll see an opportunity to look at this very differently than what the current tool is, Naviance, that allows us to have a much broader perspective and depth and complexity of that tool. So it's taking Naviance and really expanding it and the work that it can do. So excited about that.
But are we also somewhere along the way providing the supports and curriculum during the high school?
Oh, yes. Yeah. But you need the tool to see all those different experiences. So are you talking about from a CTE pathway, from?
I'm talking about the meat, so to
Yeah.
speak. I mean, the tool, and I'm just kind of visually thinking of it in comparison to Naviance. That's certainly fine to helps facilitate, but, as we've been talking about the content of high school, there needs to be the
Like the strands?
meat.
Yeah, the strands.
Being educated on different pathways.
Correct, that 100%, we have that. You'll have the strand, so if we were to say a medical pathway strand, you will see all of the different connections from the course offerings, the math, the science, all of those pieces that would lead you into that type of pathway that allows you to walk through that door, be it right into a career if you took some CTE courses like over at Fox Valley that allowed you to be certificated and be able to go in, or if you wanted to go into a 2-year or into that 4-year. So yeah, that's what I think using that terms around strand, that's what that would be.
And
All of those different courses.
Do we have all the courses today? I would expect that we have to add things.
That will be that ongoing piece that we continue to add. We have a few that are, forgetting the term, in the C. Endorsed. We have a few that are already endorsed, and then we have others that through the work that we do, we're creating as well. So we'll have we'll show you the work that is currently happened, and then what are those next steps?
So we've had a challenging conversation at the table around the vet tech program. Last week's regular board meeting, I think in the consent agenda, had a re-upping of our relationship with Fox Valley in the consent agenda. When you're talking about these strands, are you talking about bringing a recommendation to the board in that meeting about which programs and what the resource burden for those programs will be? I heard the conversation about the 4 core and the CAI process for the 4 core, but I think what I'd like to understand is, if you just use vet tech as an example, the potential for other programs, will those be encapsulated or incorporated in what you bring back in a month?
Yes, and if we were to use like a vet tech, we will not be bringing anything forward from that lens that would need significant dollars to ensure that that piece works. We have many of them through an engineering lens and walking that piece all the way through, from what would it look like as a 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grader, and what are those courses, and then what are those courses or electives or clubs that would also be supportive for a student to go through that piece of it. But from the side of vet tech, no, that's not the piece that we will bring forward.
I was only using that
Yes.
as an example of a program that had a particular outcome. And so when I think about these, as you described them, strands, I would think that is an example. If I hear engineering as an example, there could be finance or
Correct.
healthcare or some other set. Do I understand rightly that you'll bring a recommendation around what set?
Yes. Yeah, the current ones we're working through, and then those upcoming ones that we will continue working through either, we'll have both of those with a recommendation for next steps.
Well, yeah, we'll be looking at the endorsed pathways that are through the state board that will produce an endorsement on a transcript and on a diploma. But then there are also career cluster groupings that we'll be looking at, similar to District 214, where they have pathways. So for example, just an example is medical careers or health science careers. And then all of the coursework, explore coursework, or elective coursework that aligns with that, in addition to the graduation requirements that also kind of fold together, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, with the idea that each of those career cluster pathways, I don't know what to call them exactly right now, so it sounds a little funny, but would be something that would be communicated with and in the revised course offering book that would be available 6th grade, really anybody in the community, but really to be considered by parents, families, and students from 6th grade up to be able to plan accordingly, whether that's high school courses at the middle school level, or if that's specific explore courses that they want to avail themselves to get them ready or make some decisions. But obviously, I guess I say obviously, maybe that's the wrong word, on and off opportunities, so that maybe in 6th grade they're interested in engineering and then they shift to medical careers or health careers when they're in 8th grade, that hasn't tracked them and caused them to go off, off a track.
So I want to ask a clarifying question and then make a request based on your answer. Are you going to be talking about all the things that we have currently, that these are all the classes we have, so here are the options for next year? Or are you also going to be talking about, here are the things, and maybe you kind of answered this, I just want to make sure I know exactly. Are you also going to be talking about, here are things we could consider offering that are in, this realm? Specifically, like the vet tech thing, we didn't necessarily go with that this year, but is that something that, are we gonna be able to be looking at stuff that says, here are all the options we might have based on what Fox Valley Career Center has, or whether I heard you say we're not bringing things to us on the 21st that are gonna be cost-bearing to make decisions over, but are we gonna at least see, here are some options we might look at for the future?
So what we're going to be bringing in terms of the course offering booklet is kind of a sampling of what it's going to look like based on, with the information that we currently have. So our current course offerings through the CAI process is where additional course offerings can be recommended or designed, and so that would come through that work. So in terms of the course offering book, it would really be focused in on organizing and creating visual pathways for our families and for our students, focused on career clusters.
For next year, to be available next fall?
For next year.
Okay. Well, for them to select now for next year, or to select next?
Right, it would be, yes,
26,
so it would be,
27
here's
school
the
year?
design.
Okay,
Back from the board in regard to the
Got it,
design.
okay.
And to the information, so that it can be completed over the course of the summer, and a lot of feedback loops with families and
Awesome.
specific.
And staff.
Staff members, department chairs, counselors, et cetera. So that will all be embedded within that process before it would be brought in its final draft to the
Okay.
board in September, October of next year for approval for students to
select
register for the
spring,
26, 27 year.
Okay, got it. So my request kind of goes to, and I'm going to probably not explain it right, but Mrs. King is going to know kind of what I'm getting at with regards to math. When you're talking about pathways and what this looks like, you give this example about STEM or engineering, maybe I think you said, but then there's also, there's also medical. And what I would know, having the medical degree, that is that you do have to take a baseline of math things. So if you're thinking about that as a sixth grader, obviously, we're not saying every sixth grader needs to decide what their career is going to be by the end of sixth grade.
Right.
But what interests them? Could we then, are you saying that these options are going to be saying, well, you need to take this math, this sophomore or seventh grade, and then this is what your eighth grade choices are going to be like? Do you kind of know what I'm saying? Okay, I knew you'd know what I was talking about.
And the beauty of the committees is that they have middle school and high school staff. And so looking at the trajectory from middle school into high school. So again, if there are high school courses that are recommended or needed at the middle school level, then they would know that in sixth grade. Really, anybody would know that before that too, but I'm not sure that they would be looking for.
Is that
but they
kind of
could.
what the kids will see when you're saying,
Yeah.
here are the pathways that,
Correct.
not that you have to take this one, then that one, then this one, but here's the class you're going to want to take of these kinds of ideas, and then the next year you're going to want to choose from ones of these. Is that
Correct.
awesome? That
Yes.
sounds amazing. Thank
Because
you
that's
so much.
what a lot of the board feedback that we heard was making sure that we have clear communication with our families, starting earlier in the middle school environment, so they can start having those types of conversations earlier. Again, not saying this is the pathway a 11-year-old is on for the rest of their D303 career or time with us, but to start seeing that bigger picture and seeing those trajectories, seeing the type of courses that are there, the level of rigor that will be required if you want to do this type of pathway or this type of pathway. So I think the board's going to be very pleased with the progress that we've made for the listening and based off of this feedback here, I feel like we're right there.
Oh, go ahead. Just one more thing. I just want to say that someone here at this table, probably Mrs. King, did that for one of my kiddos, and they found that so incredibly teacher for him at that time, and just sort of laid out for him, and it made it real easy for him to continue to go back to look, oh, well, these are my options. And so to have that available for lots and lots of kiddos would be so amazing. So I appreciate that. That's so awesome. Thank you.
Just the only other question I had, at some point, are you looking at how our high schools are structured organizationally?
Tell me a little bit more, sorry.
Well, like, for example, are the department chairs in their role as it's defined? For example, are they functioning ideally as we would like it to? Are,
The high school experience aspect for this presentation, I would not say that is a component of what we're bringing forward for the 21st. That could be a different conversation that we can have around where do I see us with our department chairs, that next step and that kind of work. We can have that conversation.
well, I just gave that as an example.
Yeah.
I guess to me, that's part of a high school experience or high school transformation that we're talking about. Our counselors come to mind as well. Is that really structured in the optimal way for impact, for example?
Okay. Currently, no, not from that lens. We haven't looked at it, but we can bring that back to our team on Thursday. Dr. Christensen, are we? Thursday?
Wednesday.
Tomorrow? No, yeah, we already have.
Let's not lose a day.
We can bring that back. We can bring
Okay,
that to the team.
thank you.
Tammy will tell you when to be there.
Once I figure out the day of the week.
I wondered if it was possible for us, if it made sense for the board to have access to the PACE framework. That's new to me, and you've mentioned it more than once in a meeting, and it sounds like it's a big guidance from the state that we might need to know before we go.
We'll make sure you have all of that information, a little bit of
The other thing I'm wondering, and thank you for talking about how middle school will be impacted. So one of the things I am wondering about is if the high school schedule is not something you can decide May 1st for the following fall. However, we have a little more flexibility with middle school and especially elementary. So if we're making decisions for the 26, 27 school year, I think, would you be sure to consider what do those 8th graders at least need to have the year before for if we're that close to making a decision, so that we don't have a class that misses out opportunities. So that domino effect of if you need to have something in 9th grade, what do you need to know in 6th grade? Because my sense is that we are going to be impacting middle school if we're looking, which I think is going to be fun, but could be just keeping that in mind, that we're rolling something up.
In the beauty of Dr. Christensen's committee, it does have that middle school. They are looking at their structure as well. So it's occurring at that same time. So they are already having those types of conversations on a regular basis.
Any other comments or questions?
Okay.
All right, we'll look forward to seeing you next month. All right, we're going to move on now to part 2. 2A for discussion is our resource renewal.
Mrs. King's going to take you through that.
Turn my microphone on. Good evening tonight. I'm bringing the curriculum resource renewals to the L&T committee for the next school year. And the recommendation for the renewal of resources supports our core value of achievement when we leverage our resources for students and teachers and give them access to high-quality instructional materials. Curriculum resources also support our strategic priorities of instructional coherence. They are the foundation of a guaranteed and viable curriculum with evidence-based instructional practices and equitable systems of support. Tonight, the D303 administration is recommending the approval of our 25-26 resources. In accordance with the board policy 4.6, the board has to approve purchases above $25,000. These resources have already been previously approved by the board, and they are included in our 5-year budget plan. So annual renewal is needed, even though the resources have already previously been approved. Renewal is needed for students and teachers to maintain access to their materials. In school year 2024-25, our renewals were $1,510,102. In school year 25-26, we've had a 1.2% increase. So we're at $1,528,491. Some of the increased costs are due to increased enrollments in AP and dual enrollment courses. More materials are needed for those courses for AP Pre-Calculus, AP Calculus BC, AP English Lang, AP Human Geography, AP Psychology, and our dual credit course ECC, English 101 and 102. And in this table, you can see the increased enrollment by course. The total high school population is only increasing by 13 students, but we see increased enrollments in our AP courses and dual credit courses, and this is aligned with our strategic commitment to have students have either one AP course or a dual credit course by the time they graduate. I'm going to caution that this table is not a full-scale survey of enrollment for next year, but just related to our costs for curriculum renewals next year. We are excited. We look in the math department at increases in AP Pre-Calculus. This was the first year this course was offered. We have a 13% increase of students enrolling next year. I think that course directly impacted the next line in the table, AP Calculus BC. We had a 40% increase in that very rigorous class for students. For the first time in many years, we'll be offering 3 sections at North High School, and we have increased enrollments at East High School as well. In the Social Studies department, we have increased enrollments in AP Psychology and AP Human Geography. AP Human Geography, or AP Hugs, as they call it at school, is exceptional and notable because that's one of the only courses available to grade 9 students in high school. And you can see that we have 86 more students, or a 64% increase in that course enrollment. We also, in the English department, have increases in AP English Lang and our dual credit with ECC, English 101 and 102.
Any questions?
That's exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. King.
All right, do we put this
On consent?
on consent?
Thank you.
And now we go to student international travel.
Dr. Christensen.
I have one international travel request, and then also one that is not international, but it is overseas, so felt that it was important to get board approval as well. The first trip that I'll be discussing is the music department trip to Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. This trip is scheduled to take place during spring break of the 26th school year, so next year, from March 28th or April 4th. Students will not be missing school. The trip is available to any student in Chorale at either of the 2 high schools and orchestra students at North High School. They'll have an opportunity to have 3 concert performances overseas, as well as opportunities to visit historical sites and have some cultural experiences relative to the music that they've been studying over their time at the high schools. The approximate cost is $4,159 for each student. There are fundraising opportunities for the students to engage in should that be something that they're interested in. And the recommendation is to consider for board approval at the next meeting.
Any questions? All right, move forward.
And then the other overseas trip is an educational tour or trip to Puerto Rico. This would be available to St. Charles East students in grade 9 through 11 next year, as this trip will take place in June, so after graduation for the 12th graders, hence the 9th through 11th grade. This is being coordinated by a Spanish teacher at St. Charles East High School. It is scheduled from June 17th to the 24th of 2026. It does provide opportunities for educational experiences as well as cultural enrichment during their trip. And again, the recommendation is for consideration of approval for this trip.
questions, comments? All right. Move it forward. And the school calendar.
Ms. Conlon?
Thank you. The next item is the 28-29 school calendar. The calendar committee met to discuss the 28-29 school calendar, which that seems that sounds like it's so far away, but that's where we are in our progress of approving calendars. One thing that you will notice is that we have looked at all of the calendar criteria with meeting the ISB and school code guidelines, placing institute and SIP days strategically, equaling out the quarters of the trimesters and the semesters, and the first semester ending before winter break, keeping consistent with our neighboring districts and the expectations and traditions, along with the ISB waiver of the 2 full SIP days in place of 4 half-days. One thing that I will point out is that you will notice the start date for students would be August 10th, as opposed to what it has been the last few years would be traditionally August 9th. But one thing that we have heard from the community and our staff is that starting with double digits feels a little bit different than starting with a single digit in August. And so we moved it to starting on Thursday as opposed to on a Wednesday, so that helps with that feeling of I'm starting at least when we're in double digits. So it seems like a little thing, but I think that means a lot to our students and our staff. Everything else is pretty much in line with where we have traditionally.
I do have a question. I noticed that the graduation day has not been set, so I don't know where we're at in terms of contract negotiation or.
I will have to check on that and get back to you. I'm not sure where we are, if we're out this far with 28-29.
Thank you for taking into account the feedback of the double digits, single digits. Oh, I don't think I'm off, but I really appreciate you doing something like that. Thank you so much.
Any other comments? All right, and we will be voting on that then at the next board meeting. That brings us to item 3, adjournment. Our future agenda items include that in April we will be doing the high school experience, and we may also have some resources that we're potentially going to vote on.
Yep.
Anything else?
I just wanted to double check. So Mrs. Fairgrieve had asked some questions about, the roles of people within. Am I to infer from this that is not going to be part of this, from what we were saying, that's not going to?
I apologize. I'm going to bring it forward to the team on Wednesday. We'll talk that piece through and figure out where we can layer that into it.
Okay, all right. All right. Apparently my inference was incorrect.
No, you're good.
All right, thank you.
And just to close the loop, so for the board meeting, we'll get an update on the high school graduation
Yeah,
date?
before you vote on this? Correct. Yeah.
Anything else? All right, seeing none, then I will call this meeting to adjournment at 6:08. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation and your time.
My hydration, it's hard to knock my hydration game.
I think how you were
All right. Now that we're all here and present, I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the school board on Monday, March 17th, 2025 at 6:12 PM. Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll?
Yes, Mrs. Bell?
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Here.
Mr. Kuchert?
Here.
Mr. Lentz?
Here.
Mrs. McCabe?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
Mr. Lackner?
Here, can you please stand for the pledge? It looks like we have no citizen comments. That brings us to item 3 on the agenda, the D303 Personnel Report. Can I have a motion to approve the D303 Personnel Report?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz and Mr. Kuchert. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll?
Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Yes.
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes, the motion carries 7-0. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll?
Mr. Kuchert?
Yes.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mrs. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Yes.
Mr. Lackner?
Yes, the board is adjourned to closed session at 6:14 PM.